Lives on Air. Very, very excited to talk to Lucia or Lucia, depending on which part of the world you are at. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to you guys too. So today we're going to talk about something very, very interesting, and I love that. It's about how do you utilize A/B tests to understand changing shopping habits and shopper habits and understand your consumers and your shoppers better. And I mean, what better than actually understanding consumers and what they do and how they feel. It's so important for all of us to actually run better businesses, products, whatever we do. Understanding customers is at the center of it. Interesting thing about Lucia, I'll get started with that first. She built her first web shop at 11 years old. I mean, that's just mind-blowing. And over the years, she's continued to build a ton of experience in many different domains, from data and statistics to user experience and content, to development, front-end engineering, in fact, and then also on qualitative research and consumer psychology. So it's a breadth of different experiences that have come together. And over these last 5 years, she's been, and now at Speero, where Lucia is a Senior Experimentation Strategist, she's been very busy. She's optimized a ton of high traffic environments with millions and millions of visitors. And she's been scaling up experimentation programs to more than 100 tests a year, right? In fact, Lucia herself has run hundreds and hundreds of tests and will A/B test, and we'll dive into that now. So, hey, Lucia, thank you so much for being on air with us. Welcome.
Yes, thank you so much. Nice to be here.
Lovely to meet you. And we'll get started very quickly with the interesting topic that we're going to talk about. But before we start, I have a quick question. As someone who's so deep into understanding consumer and consumer psychology through qualitative and quantitative research, what are the top 3 changes that you saw during the pandemic in consumer behavior?
So I would say at that point, I was working for a news website, which was super interesting because also the news totally changed. So I was working for the biggest news website in the Netherlands. They have 8 million visitors. And we always saw the same patterns in the data. Like people would wake up and they would read the news on their phone or on their way to work. So the first thing we noticed there was that people woke up later. They didn't commute anymore because everyone was in lockdown, right? So they did go to their phone still. It was just usually on a later time, and kind of this habit of time and when and where to do things changed. So that was the first. Of course, for a news website, it was an enormous spike of traffic because everyone was like, well, what's going on? I need to know the latest news, right? So that was, there was a big increase. We actually at that point had put a redesign live from something, and then we saw like a lot of weird stuff happening, but were like things we weren't used to, but that turned out to be not because of the redesign, but because that was all tested and experimented, but because of the new behavior that people actually had. So that was one thing that I noticed, like really hands-on. And I think another thing that happened during like when the pandemic started is that a lot of businesses had to go online, right? They were kind of forced into this digital transformation. They would have to have online stores, and their stores needed to be good because, you know, their shops were closed. So there was suddenly also a huge demand for like zero and experimentation and optimizing shops. And I think a lot of businesses also have grown from that if they would be able to pick it up, the digital change, I guess. And I think now what we're seeing is that, yeah, a lot of web shops are actually going back to the 2019 level. And that can be something that they weren't used to, because that might be lower or that might be different. So it can be that people are falling back to their old behavior patterns or doing what they're used to doing. So I guess I would say I have noticed those 2 big changes during COVID.
Yeah, and are you seeing some? That's an interesting point that you brought up, is that some of the retail specifically, you're seeing some of the behavior kind of go back to 2019 levels or standards or times. And do you see any specific shift from start of the pandemic, during the pandemic, and now in 2022? Or do you see a change this year?
Yeah, so I think the change is that the world is opening again, and that most of the time the numbers and behaviors do go back to what it was before, which sometimes is disappointing for business owners. Like they invested a lot in online and suddenly everyone can, walk to the store again. Yeah, that can be changing some things for business owners, also for bigger companies probably.
Yeah. Interesting things over there. But we want to talk about the topic that we came to talk about. So let me start off with a question around that. If you want to optimize for changing habits, right, and changing behaviors of customers, how do you do that?
Yeah, so it's an easy question with a difficult answer, probably. So first of all, what you do with experimentation is you put a variant live and you hope that that variant actually changes the behavior of your visitor in such a way that you can measure a significant change. So of course, A/B testing and experimentation is always about changing behavior and measuring that with the right statistics, the right data. And also another part of it might be changing like routines from people. And this is something that not much web shops or brands have focused on yet. But I think it's something that is growing in the industry. Like, how do you actually change a routine? For example, what happened with COVID on the news website, like that people would wake up later. How do you change a routine of people and how do you keep them doing the same routine? That's a very different question to ask. And I think we will be discussing this a little bit more.
Yeah, of course. And do you know how long a test, like how do you know rather how long a test should run for when you're trying to experiment and find out these behavioral patterns and trying to kind of reinforce the behavior?
Yeah, so I'm gonna share my screen here because usually, and this is what most CRO specialists will know, most of the time people use a calculator. This is, for example, the Speero CXL calculator. And usually you look to data, you see what you got. And for example, you have like 30,000 visitors a week. You have this amount of conversions, you have 2 variants, and then you look to the minimal detectable effects of what you can actually measure. So for example, if you're making a change that will impact transactions, for this test on this page with this 30,000, this is just a number I filled in, right? But for this setup, imagine it's a page, and imagine we maybe, instead of a normal button, we put a sticky button somewhere. So this test would, for example, if you would want to run it only 2 weeks, you have only 2 weeks time, the minimal detectable effect is 4.12%. So that is the change in the uplift that you can measure and make it significant with not with Bayesian, but with frequency statistics. So, which is kind of the kind of harder variant on statistics, I guess, because you can also measure with Bayesian statistics, and they are a bit like softer. They give you the outcome of how much chance your test has to beat the control. So that is different, but this is something that you usually look at when starting a test, and I assume which many experimenters will know. And based on this, maybe you're gonna think like, maybe I want to run this test for 4 weeks, because then I have a detectable effect of 2.9, which is more reasonable, for example. So this is usually the way to do it for any type of tests, actually. But then I started to notice that, especially for that big news website that I was working on. So before, I would be working on e-commerce. I would be working on, more like websites that people would land on, shop, or do something. But with this news website, it was more like a website like Facebook or like YouTube.
Or BuzzFeed.
Yeah, exactly. And people would just come like super regularly, and they would be really low. And if you would ever change something, they will be shocked, like, whoa, my experience, what I know for years, every day is changed. So it was really hard to actually make a change there. So then this actually got me thinking, like, okay, so if I change the website in an experiment, and if this is like a bigger thing, how they maybe access the news or whatever, how do I change those super deep routines? How do I actually change that? And I did a talk about this, and I will share my screen again. Here it comes. So, and I was wondering, like, how long does it then take to change like a routine? And the first thing I found was actually from plastic surgery. Apparently that is a very common knowledge. And the first thing you will end up, if you also search for this question, that in the 1950s, Dr. Maltz was a plastic surgeon. He found that after doing a nose job or like also amputating an arm or leg, it would take patients 21 days before they would adjust to this new situation. And this was kind of used as a standard that was taken by also, what's the name of that? People like life coaches and like Tony Robbins. He also used this 21 days. You only need 21 days and then you can totally change your routine. But in fact, this was not peer-reviewed science. So in fact, when this peer-reviewed science came, there was actually another view on this. And this was Philippa Lelly's study. And this was, just actual research that has been repeated as well. And it took somewhere between 18 days to 245 days for people to form really a new habit, a new routine. And the routine was super simple. It was just about like taking a walk after dinner. Some people would be able to make it in 18 days, some people in like 250 days, but the average was 66 days. So then I figured that maybe I need to run my test a little bit longer.
Yep. I'm definitely in the 250, 260 days kind of category. And when did you actually run your test longer and see any results? Do you have any learnings from that yet?
Yeah, so I did multiple tests like this, like for at least 2 or 3 months. And I'm not the only one, because I also heard, for example, booking.com, big website to buy like a hotel for a night. You can, you have this expert or genius program is the name. And also something that they tested for months and months and months, maybe even years. I forgot that, but I heard that from the person, head of experimentation at that time was Lucas Vermeer. He also said, like, yeah, we do run tests for a longer period, because otherwise we will never know if it actually made a change from one person buying one hotel and then coming half a year later back, getting a discount and booking again with them. So they also did it. I think the biggest question is, how do you do that? Because with client-side testing, and this is basically like the setup of a test, everything is based on cookies. So you are determined to be in a test or in a variant based on your cookies. And cookies are, they are not so reliable anymore, right? So they used to be this thing that will be forever there, but now it's just like, how long can you trust on a cookie to be there? I think like the general notion is still like, it is okay to run tests for like max 4 weeks, but then already you will have this like cookie noise, people call it, because visitors will lose their cookie and will come back maybe in another variant. So
is that where server-side testing and things like that really help out?
Exactly. So this is where this is where you need to change your setup in order to actually test for like months. And this is something that is sometimes organizations have a tool like SiteSpect and they are already doing it server-side. And what it basically means is that as soon as the user connects to the server or makes a request, it is already bucketed in a variation, no matter what page that visitor will look at, which is sometimes a little bit tricky. But it really depends on the maturity of the organization, if this is something that they do or if that is something that they are willing to do, right? Because most of the time companies use tools like Google Optimize or VWO maybe. They mostly first offer clients side testing based on cookies. And I think the next step usually for companies is the server-side testing. Yeah.
And do you see it being more relevant for certain kinds of companies versus other? Like if I am, e-commerce business or a SaaS business, like how do I decide whether server-side testing is going to be relevant for me?
Definitely. So I'm going to share my screen again. I was also thinking about that because it's not relevant for everybody, right? And when do you actually need to think about this habit formation and routines for an experimentation program? So I made this kind of division. I'm not sure I give it the right naming here, but on one side you have this drop and shop visitors. So let's see. I think this slide, I updated it later, but in any way, the visitor lands by something that can be either right away or that can be within a cycle of like, let's say a month. And after that, people leave again. Like people's not going to buy a phone like every month, or they're not going to buy glasses every month. Then on the other side, you have like this website where you will find visitors that are these creatures of habit. So this can be CNN, it can be Amazon, it can be weather or banking apps. Those are the websites which people might visit daily or return to with a certain pace in it, like every day or every other day. And those are the ones that can really benefit, of course, from testing on a longer period. But it might also be that you are a business like Booking.com and you're looking to measure what an effect a change have in like a year or months from now. I think that's when server-side testing becomes interesting. I think I also have a slide in here like it also has to do with your maturity. So there is a thing called experimentation maturity. Usually how it starts out is that there is one person which is kind of a jack of all trades, and that person doesn't 100% focus on experimentation, but does it just on the side. Then you get one person in the business that is focused 100% on experimentation and does a lot him of her or herself and tries to bring this mindset into a company. And later on, if this person succeeds or everyone is willing to help, then this builds kind of this support system around it. Different departments are involved, and more and more people want to run experiments. And this is the point, like in between there and like what I call this evergreen experimentation, where there is a center of excellence. Somewhere in there, like changing to server-side testing, if you don't already have it, becomes relevant because it usually does cost money and development time and things like that. So it's definitely not relevant for everyone, but I think there is a big future in testing like this.
We have a few audience questions coming up, so I want to quickly dive into that before we continue with our conversation. The first question's from Barada, and he's asking, what's the true cost of running an online store? Do you see the practice of experimentation evolving and becoming easier to do versus now, like 5 years back?
So the cost of running an online shop or the cost of experimentation?
I think at least it's saying it's an online store. I think with experimentation is most likely what he means.
Yeah, exactly. Because you can, if you just want to start a shop yourself, you can just do it through WordPress and it doesn't need to cost much. And experimentation, you can start with Google Optimize, like the free version of it, and just try to set it up. But you do need to understand like a little bit of front-end development probably, and how to create a test in order to get something live, and in order to run a test that actually gives like results that you can do something with. So it might be, you have to like get an hour from a developer or something to set it up. Plus you need actually a lot of traffic, so you need to be able to make good samples to run experiments. And there are tools like the one that I showed in the beginning, like there's this Speero calculator. I think there's also the A/B test guide, with which you can calculate if your samples are big enough to test.
Yeah. And I think his second part of the question is, do you see experimentation evolving and becoming easier to do now versus when you started 5 years back?
Yeah, it really depends on the setup. So 5 years back, I think it was still like zero, and experimentation was not so like integrated into companies yet. So, and I'm from Europe, right? So that it is also, it's also different in different parts of the world. So I think now, like where I'm from, in Dutch companies, it's very known what zero is, what experimentation is. But this is not true for everywhere in the world. So there it might still grow. But I think what's happening is that people know what it is. They want to do it for their business. And in that sense, it grows. The tooling itself, is still kind of the same, although they also change a lot and improve a lot. But the basics have never changed. Like, you do need to know a little bit of statistics and like how that all works. Yeah,
that's fair. The second question is from Ankit. The way consumers browse through pages vary across devices, mobile, desktop. How do we optimize for that? I think optimize experiments for that, maybe?
Yeah, so it has been like a hard question in optimizing in general, right? Because you can also not perfectly measure when someone switches from their mobile device to your website and what they have seen and what they have not. It can be that on the website, like on desktop, they have been in your experiment and then they go to mobile and they don't see it. It is especially tricky if you do stuff with pricing and stuff. Then they might see something different or a different offer. Like in one you have free shipping, in the other you don't.
Oh man, such a mess.
It is a mess, but in any test there is always like noise. The world is full with noise, and I guess that's just another way of adding noise. So I don't have like this solution right there, just to kind of accept that there will be noise in testing and in experimentation, and but even with that, it's still very valuable to do experimentation.
Yeah. The third question is from Soumya. How do we know which test to prioritize first? Is there any framework for that, or something like that?
I think there are many frameworks like that. So when I started out, I used the ICE or the PI model. It's basically you answer 3 questions about how much impact the test is going to have. And it consists of 3 things, and then you give a score to that, and it ends up with a number. Then I think the more elaborate model for that is the PXL prioritization, which asks like, I don't even know, like it's 7 questions or like 10 questions. And it asks questions like, is the change above the fold? Is the change on a page that has high traffic? So that really takes into consideration like how many people this test will actually affect. So that one is already a little bit more precise. Then I know there is also someone in Speero that is called Ruben de Boer. I think he was also on this show, and he has like this prioritization system in which he looks back to tests that are already done and tries to make an estimation based on what is already known, like what kind of tests are winning, to see which tests to do first. So I would say, start with PI or ICE. If that works or doesn't work, move up to PXL. It takes a little bit more time, but gives you a little bit better result. And if you really want to like geek out, then you go for like evidence-based prioritization, or you mix them up. But it's always an estimation, but it definitely helps. That's
thank you for that. Actually, which reminds me that we should probably be bringing Ruben back and talking about evidence-based experimentation at some point in time. So thank you for that. These are the 3 questions that have come in yet. If more come in, we'll jump up to that. But we have 4 more minutes on the clock, so I just want to make sure we round up what we discussed today. So yeah, like last 3 questions, right? What makes experimentation such a big thing and a field in itself today?
I think it has to do, well, one side it is practical, right? The fact that we could be able to do this like digitally in stores, you could never do it like literally. People did change to do that, but now we are really able to measure the impacts. And also on the other hand, I think it also has something to do with culture changing, and the fact that anyone can have an idea that might be valuable to change the website or to actually experiment with. And that we are, with experimentation, it can mean that the idea of, and this is really like I'm being a bit idealistic, but it would be great if the idea of someone in customer service will be next to the idea of a CEO, and they would both have the same value. And in the end, the experiment would tell which one was the leader or the winner. It's not about hierarchy that much anymore. It's just about improving and measuring that. And I really like that about Speero and what experimentation can do.
Yeah, no, I'm totally with you that. And sometimes the best ideas and the best, insights actually come from people who are closer versus in a large company from the CEO, right? Or even from the heads of the functions, because they're not necessarily very close to the customer or to, the listening to the signals every single day, right? Totally agree with you. And do you think, or how have you seen this power of experimentation kind of almost transform e-commerce businesses, right? So I'll club like 2 questions in it. What is the power that it brings to e-commerce businesses, and how have you seen it change and transform the way businesses actually run?
Yeah, I think I have. So before, I think the place where I started with Speero was at this big corporate, and usually, like there was the CEO, and the CEO would tell this person underneath him, that would tell that person underneath him, that would tell the team, that would tell us which stuff needed to be done. And when we started experimentation, it was just from our own teams, and we tried some things, and then we had a big winner that lead to like millions of revenue in the end. And then suddenly the people like all up there started listening to us, started paying attention, and we also as a team got more confident, and we had some kind of we had a little bit more power, the power of making decisions or influencing what things are was not only with the people that lead the company anymore. It was just with regular people, with anyone like you and me.
Yeah. That's awesome. And thank you so much. We are right on time, and thank you so much. Is there anything that you want to kind of add on in the final minute, and just as a last parting words to people about experimentation and how to understand consumer behavior better?
Not really. Like I feel like I talked a lot already. I tried to explain like everything I know to give some new views on experimentation. And if anyone has any questions, please find me on LinkedIn and just ask the questions. Maybe I can help out and just connect anyway. That's nice.
Absolutely. Folks, whoever's on or if you're watching it later, just feel free to reach out to Lucia, and we'll share her details along with the live stream. And that's it for this week. And thank you so much for being here. Thank you, Lucia. We'll hope to bring you back again someday.
All right. Thank you. Have a nice day.
You too.
Bye.
All right. Bye.